Today I promise to speak on 3 chapters in 15 minutes. How many believe that's a miracle? Okay. So pray hard. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, 13, and 14 have a central theme, which is love and peace. Love and peace that Paul was attracting his words to. We need to be people, we need to be the kind of person, when they see us, they sense love and peace. Not conflict, anger, frustration, not complaining, not belly aching, but rather that brings joy to your presence. People want to be around you. I have a real problem with my little sister. She's quite a bit younger than I am, mentally and physically, much more good looking than I am. How much did you pay him? Anyways, but they will tell me, you are Maureen's brother. They don't tell her that she is David's sister. They do, but they do it with some kind of sadness, some kind of disappointment. I know David. And if you knew David, like I know David, oh, what a bum. I tell you, if God could love me, he could love anybody. Anybody. If God cared for me, he could care for anybody. Anybody. Isn't that wonderful? To know that I am your example of what God will reach way down and help, because he loves me. He loves me. How many have children that you know of here? How many are not sure, but maybe you have lots of children that you don't know about? But no matter what you do, they have your blood in them. No matter what you do. And they can identify you by that blood. But can they identify you by their activities? So Paul is saying 2 things to the church of Corinth. The church of Corinth was a wild west bunch of people. It was the Los Angeles of the day. It was where people from all backgrounds had gathered for commerce and to play football. It was where they came and did sport mentally. They tried to outfox each other. It was a place of bad people from all kinds of religions. So I'm going to ask you a question here, and don't be ashamed. How many have ever been part of a Pentecostal church beside myself? Okay. How many have been a Catholic? Okay. How many have been something in between? There's a bunch in there. And everyone will tell you there's only one way, and that's my way. Right? Or you're on, what'd you say, Clay? Highway. That's true. So what has happened is that Paul has come across a very unruly, very egotistical, very power hungry, a very nasty group of people who have realized that God loved them anyways and were doing their best in their way from their background to serve God. And it was all different. I had a lady, one of my favorite ladies, said, I'm going to give up something for Lent. And I looked under the bed and I didn't see any lint. I would have given it. No, she didn't mean that. And through the course of it, her giving up, I got several phone calls from her friends who had been affected by her change in personality from giving up what she had given up for Lent. And now she's mellowed out, smooth, sweet, wonderful lady. She always has been. But we go through times when we respond poorly to pressure. Does anybody else beside me do that? Yeah. When the pressure's on, we squeeze and we pop out in wrong places. But I want you to know that Paul was addressing the people in the town of Corinth, that they were a mess because there were two things missing in their focus. One we find in the 13th chapter. And what is the theme of the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians? Anybody know? Love. Okay. They were missing on love. Secondly, they were church hoppers. What do you mean? David talked about them in Psalms chapter 68, verse 6, where he said this: God sets the solitary in families as it pleases him, not them. And he breaks the bonds of bondage to keep them from being free to love each other. But those that rebel dwell in a dry place. How many have ever been a Christian in a foreign land or a place where you could not be with other people of faith? And it's a bad situation. Jan and I were in a place called Mazatlan, Mexico. How many have been there? Beautiful place. A lot of good stories. Best ripper ever in my life. Caught a big old palm fish. I caught the hook of my big fishing pole in a palm tree. And it was a fight. And I was a bruiser. And he won. Nevertheless, while there, we had found ourselves without fellowship for almost 2 weeks. And we were hurting. We needed that fellowship. How many know what I'm talking about? It's a gathering together we strengthen ourselves. Not watching TV, by the way. I've tried that for the last 3 months. Didn't do me a whole lot of good except frustration. One said one thing and another said another. So we saw a poster in this hotel that said, English-speaking church at such and such a place Sunday at 11 o'clock. And it was across town. We made it. We got there. And there were about, 30 people waiting outside. And the minister came out, and it was a far out church. They were weird. They were called First Christian Church. That's the name of the church. And I thought, wow. Those guys are bad. They don't do what we do. The way we do it. They must be wrong. Well, the minister came out, he says, I know speak the English very well. Is that Italian or is that Spanish? I'm not sure. What's that, Frankenstein? Anyways, we know speak of it very good. So anybody here can preach? Our preacher, he retired. And Jan, being such a lovely, gentle person, jabbed me in the ribs. I still have a bruise. And she said, my husband can preach. He is a good preacher. Well, how would she know? She was the one that done all the preaching in our family. Every morning until night, Dave, you know. So I'm very gentle. You know how I am, sort of reclusive. And she said, he'll preach. And I did. And they took us out for dinner afterwards. And when they did, one guy said, I'm going to pay for the preacher. He saw I wasn't eating very much. Another person said, I'm going to pay for the preacher's wife. Oh, brother. And we worked out a plan where they would go from campground to campground, mobile home to mobile home, apartments to apartments, hotel. Print these posters and stack them all over the town. That next Sunday, the church was packed, literally packed, and the message that I got to give was, you cannot retire from God's kingdom. You cannot retire from God's kingdom. People who are ministers and retire have retarded. That's not retiring. Retiring means to recap and get going. How many retired your cars during the Second World War? Yeah, because we couldn't get a new tire, could we? Get them recapped. And so at the end of the afternoon, we got a knock on our trailer, and it was the minister who had retired. Tears. And 4 weeks later, we left the packed place, and he resumed the ministry, and God gave him. Boy, all of this to say this. Those people came from every background and many that I knew not of, yet they came in one accord. It was a Honda. One accord. And they were there because they loved the fellowship of the saints. Second thing he said, I want you to know, brothers, that you're all different. Look somebody right in both eyeballs and say, boy, are you different. Amen. You are really different. Why are we different? How many have ever tried the old bass plug that was red and had a white body and a red head and caught fish like boom, boom, boom? How many have caught a fish on it lately? Not me. Not me. Because I don't take it out of the tackle box. You won't catch any fish in the box. Until we get to where the people are in our community, we are not going to be fishers of men. Amen. We got to get it out of the box and into their heart that they are loved. Even though they are weird. even though they're different, they're not as good looking as Joe. See? Not many like that around here. How old are you now? 53? 88. Well, I can't count very well, but that was pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to know that God has something special for you. And we're going to talk in a couple of 2 or 3 weeks about what has just happened. This moment. And so I ask you the question that was asked the first sermon of this year by Brad. I love Brad. I've had Brad for a long time, and then they hit me alongside. I like that commercial. I love Brad. But I love him for what he tells me. He said this, is time made for man, or is man made for time? Think about it. In a couple of 2 or 3 weeks, we'll talk about that. But in the meantime, say it with me, is man made for time? Say that.
Is man made for time?
Or is time made for man?
Time made for man.
It's been one of the most incisive things that has been bothering me, Brad. Sometimes I don't like you. You fill my head with thoughts, and I have to think. But I appreciate that. Thank you.
Amen, brother.
And we are together today, totally unusual people, totally different. But there are 2 things that we need to see. We are all different, and we have spiritual expressions that are not the same as anybody else. That's the first part. We'll talk about this many, many times. The second part is what you do must be done in a 4-letter word which starts with L-O-V-E. Father, spread your love through us in our unique way. Each one here different, but every member serving the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. God bless you.